throat clears. Okay. Yeah. So good morning, good Thanksgiving morning, in the United States anyway. Yeah, an important time to really think about the kindness. I mean, we've just been so showered with kindness here at the Abbey. It would be very, very silly, actually, for us not to be aware of it at the moment. The kindness of others that has just been showering, pouring in, and by which we live every day, for goodness sake, and try to be mindful. But the presence of so much kindness lately has been really overwhelming and very moving. And I think for each one of us, I'm going to speak for all of us to say that I think our motivation to really actualize what we learn and what we have been taught, and to take advantage of the opportunity that we have in order to repay the kindness of living beings. And this is in such a conventional and kind of superficial way, in a way. There's so much that we can help to alleviate at a deeper level when we grow our own realizations and understanding. So I guess that's the motivation for today's practice. We are going to let people know online that the class will be a little bit short this morning, shorter. But we will start with the motivation. We'll start with doing the practice. We will go back to completing, I hope, the 10 qualities of the Buddha, and hopefully get on to the Dharma. Thank you very much. So let's start with just a few moments of silence. I'll set a motivation and we'll do the practice. Before we even start, we can visualize the Buddha in the space in front. A collection of qualities unsurpassable anywhere. Completely purified mind. All qualities developed to the ultimate extent. Whose compassion radiates to every living being in every moment. And ourselves surrounded by sentient beings. Ordinary beings whose capacity to become Buddha is ever present. And yet the clarity and cognizance, the pure clarity and cognizance of our mind and the emptiness of that mind, not visible to us even now. Obscured by our ignorance, obscured by the afflictions that arise from that, obscured by the karmic seeds that result from the actions we do based on our afflictions. And therefore, experiencing constant difficulties. And it doesn't have to be this way. The Buddha and the Arya Sangha, who have followed the path of the Buddhas, show us the way out. So in this Thanksgiving morning, let's just take a moment and think of all the kindness that we have received, each one of us, in so many different ways, and reaffirm our commitment to cultivate all good qualities, to purify our minds of afflictions, to generate the wisdom that penetrates it all, compelled by that compassion, so that we can be of benefit to every living being and make this session, this hour, that's the purpose of our time together. So returning to the visualization of the Buddha in the space in front, in the center, we'll expand our visualization to include the refuge field. So amidst an ocean of Samantabhadra offerings, Shakyamuni Buddha sits on this golden throne, precious gems, on cushions of a variegated lotus and sun and moon. Our root spiritual teacher appearing in the form of Shakyamuni Buddha. His body is pure golden light. His left hand is in the gesture of meditation, and his right hand is in the earth-touching gesture. And he wears the 3 robes of a monastic. Imagine that light rays brighter than the sun radiate from his body in the 10 directions. We think eyes never tire of viewing his resplendent body. Ears never tire of his enchanting speech, the melodies of the Dharma. His vast and profound mind is a treasure of knowledge and love whose depth is beyond measure. So feel that connection with the Buddha in the center. And his right is Maitreya, also radiating light, surrounded by the spiritual mentors of the lineage of the extensive deeds. His left is Manjushri and the spiritual mentors of the lineage of the profound view. A smaller throne in front sits your own root spiritual mentor. In the aspect of giving teaching, surrounded by all the spiritual mentors with whom you have a Dharma connection. They're all seated on lotus, sun and moon cushions. And in the space behind Buddha Shakyamuni sits Vajradhara, dark blue, victorious lord of myriad tantras, surrounded by the lineage of the spiritual mentors, of the blessings of the practice. Encircling these 5 thrones, there's your row of all the highest Yoga Tantra deities. Surrounded by a circle of all the meditational deities. Surrounded by a circle of all the Buddhas. Surrounded by bodhisattvas. Solitary realizer arhats. A circle of the here arhats. A wider circle of Dharma protectors. All radiating light. And then off the throne are the 4 Dharma protectors of the 4 directions. A mass array of holy beings, present, full of light, radiating light, present to guide us, following in their footsteps. And so we reflect for a moment in the causes for turning to them for refuge. What is it about cyclic existence that makes us reach out for help, for guidance? Reflect on that. And then with confidence in the three jewels, we turn to them for refuge. But think, what are the qualities that inspire that confidence in you? And then we expand that thought to include all the living beings around us, wishing them to be protected, guided, and free. Free of all sufferings, and to cultivate their own minds to become Buddhas themselves too. And so we go for refuge. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Nama Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Nama Sanghaya, Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Nama Sanghaya, Nama Sanghaya. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddha, the Dharma and the Sangha. By the merit I create by engaging in generosity and the other far-reaching practices, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and its causes. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and its causes. May all sentient beings not be separated from sorrowless bliss. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free of bias, attachment, and anger. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind, and present clouds of every type of offering, actual and mentally transformed. I confess all my destructive actions accumulated since beginningless time, and rejoice in the virtues of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until cyclic existence ends, and turn the wheel of Dharma for sentient beings. I dedicate all the of myself and others to the Great Awakening. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kanniryakayami. Then focus your attention on whichever aspect of the refuge field that you feel most connected to this morning, that you most want to purify also as well. The gurus, the Buddhas, representations of the Dharma or the Sangha. And we'll do the refuge silently, using, imagining that the light pours from the object that you're focusing on. So, for example, if you're using the Buddha, you would do the Buddha, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Buddhaya, imagining first white light pouring from all the representations of the Buddha in the space in front, filling you, flushing out all negativities. And then at some point you would turn that into golden light and imagine the realizations of their holy minds coming into you. So you can do that with any one of those objects. We'll do that for a few minutes in silence, remembering that to recite the mantra just a little bit, keep your lips, tongue moving and engaged. Namo Dharma, Namo. And then we'll do a mala of all four. Do that silently as well. Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha, Namo Guru, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharma, Namo Sangha. Namo Guruvya Namo Buddhaya Namo Dharmaya Namo Sanghaya. Spend a few moments just basking in the connection with the refuge field. Reconnecting with the visualization if you've lost it. And then the refuge objects begin to melt into light and dissolve from the outside in into the central figure of Shakyamuni Buddha. And Shakyamuni Buddha emanates infinite replicas of himself that come to the crown of your head and the heads of all the beings around you. This Buddha melts into light and absorbs into your heart. And your body, speech, and mind become inseparable from Buddha's holy body, speech, and mind. So concentrate on this. And then we'll do our Dharma talk as though this were our Lamrim moment, and we'll dedicate at the end. So you can see in the course of this, there's many places to stop and do meditation reflection. Many, many, many. You can spend a whole session just working on the reasons for taking refuge, setting your whole motivation. It's the luxury when we have 5 sessions a day to do this practice. It's really just beautiful to do. So, note that you can really spend time on this. And it's important to spend time on this. Why in the world are we taking refuge? And then what in the world are we taking refuge in? So each one of these refuge objects we can reflect on before you start the mantra. You can reflect on them while you're doing the mantra. You can reflect on their qualities. You can think about what aspects you particularly aspire for and kind of build from there. What are the ones I understand and what are the ones I don't understand? All of that can happen at various points. And even as we go through the recitations at the beginning, which we do frequently, to take the time and stop at, well, what do the 4 immeasurables have to do with taking refuge? What do each of the 7 limbs have to do with taking refuge? So much that we can, use this particular practice in this particular retreat time to enrich what we do every single day by refreshing, or for some of us, learning how our practice is informed and is grounded in, completely rooted in this practice of taking refuge. So it's a beautiful opportunity to do it. So anyway, again, as we're leading a little bit differently every time, I did, as you probably note, neglected to add the Dharma text to the visualization, but they should be there. Since I was doing the Dharma, I certainly noticed right away. So is there questions about the practice before we launch into this practice? Are people starting to practice it a little bit before we go into retreat? Good, 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 a few nods. And is that helpful? Yeah. So in starting to practice, are you finding things that don't make sense or that? Not enough time. Yeah. Yeah, you can do this practice a long time. And starting next week, we will. Okay, so let's review a little bit. Once again, the causes for taking refuge are? A wise fear. Alarm is one of Venerable's words. Alarm, I like that. Alarm at the conditions of cyclic existence. Particularly taking rebirth in the lower realms, but all of it. And then? Yeah, faith, confidence in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha to do what? Yeah, protect us from suffering. Protect us from suffering. And then, of course, the third one, as Mahayana practitioners, yeah, the wish to liberate all other living beings. And so when we looked at this, we talked last week, to develop confidence or faith in the three jewels, we need to know their good qualities. Just not like blindly, oh yeah, Buddha, oh yeah, Dharma, oh yeah, Sangha, but what is Buddha? We talked about that quite a bit last week, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it today. What is Dharma? And what is Sangha? Why are they reliable objects of refuge? I keep thinking back to the Pramanavartika teachings that we have received, extensive teachings on that text that spends the whole text proving why they're reliable, why the Buddha is a reliable guide. There's so much richness just in asking that question and meditating on the qualities of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. It's been really wonderful for me actually to have this opportunity to refresh all this. So very briefly, as we said last week, I think this comes in the Lanrim Chenmo, the Buddha is the one who has eliminated all defilements and developed all good qualities completely. Now we could unpack that one sentence for a very long time. We're not going to do that today. The Dharma is the cessation of all difficulties and the path leading to it. That's kind of an understatement too. The cessation of all difficulties and the paths leading to it. And Sangha is those who have directly perceived reality. So last week also we talked about 3 ways to think or view the Buddha, think about the Buddha in terms of Shakyamuni Buddha, the historical Buddha, or we can think of Buddha in the context of the meditational deities as beings who also became Buddha. Not one of them, no one of them just appeared as an enlightened being. There's no such thing. Every one of them took the path at some point, in some eons, and then appears in these forms in order to benefit living beings. So we can think of them in that way. And then we can also think of the Buddha that we will become. Our own potential and our own future Buddhahood can be a source of refuge for us. And that takes some thinking. Like, what does that mean? Why would that be a source of refuge? But it's fruitful reflection during the course of this retreat. And then we talked about the 4 Buddha bodies, or the 4 collections that we look at that make the 4 Buddha bodies. The Dharmakaya, which is, remember? Wisdom truth body and the nature truth body. These 2 things are really inseparable. The Buddha's omniscient mind and the emptiness of that, and the true cessations of that mind. And then the form bodies, Rupakaya, Sambhogakaya, which does what? Teaches to the higher origin of the body. Bodhisattvas, teaches bodhisattvas in the Pure Lands, right? And from that emanates what? Emanation bodies. Emanation bodies that come in the form of the Buddha, or in some cases it can be anything. A wheel-turning Buddha like Shakyamuni Buddha, or can also be emanated as as anything. Anything can a Buddha can emanate in whatever form. Not that we would have the sensibility to recognize it, but we never know, right? And then there's also the artisan appearance, which is like workers, I guess. I don't understand that one so clearly, and I should ask Saipakla before he goes. But this is also another emanation buddy. And so, and the reasons why they're worthy of, the Buddha is worthy, a worthy object of refuge first. This is again Tsongkhapa. He's mastered himself and attained the sublime state of fearlessness. If he had not done this, then he wouldn't be able to protect from all fears, which is one of the qualities of the Buddha. He has to have done this himself, right? I love this analogy. It's like a person who's already fallen down can't help someone who's also fallen down. Maybe because I fall down a lot, but don't worry, people, I'm okay. It's just I'm clumsy and I don't mind falling, so I'm willing to go. But it's true. Once you're on the ground, you can't do anything to help anybody up. So it's, I like the analogy because it's very clear. The Buddha has done this, therefore he can help us. He has skills in all ways of training disciples, which is a lot of what these 10 qualities that we started last week cover. What kind of skills? The things that a Buddha can perceive makes the Buddha a flawless guide for each individual sentient being. Third, he has great compassion. If he didn't, he wouldn't help us. If he didn't, he would not have taken the path it took to become Buddha. Geshe-la said this not just a couple of weeks ago. Eons and eons and eons. The Buddha had great compassion, developed his great compassion to become Buddha. It's something to really reflect on. And then fourth, he's pleased not by material offerings, but by offerings of practice. In other words, you can't buy the Buddha off. You can't bribe the Buddha. You can't, like, I don't know, no matter how many offerings you make, which we do need to do from our own side, but it's not because the Buddha needs those offerings, wants those offerings, and only responds to offerings. The Buddha appreciates offerings of practice, but the Buddha is equal, absolutely equal in benefiting other living beings. So Tsongkhapa says, I'll read it from here and not here. In brief, only one who is free of all fears, who is skilled in the means of freeing others from fear, who has great compassion for everyone impartially, and who acts for everyone's welfare regardless of whether or not they have benefited him, is worthy of being refuge. Those are really important 4 qualities to remember. And they're like the foundational ones, okay? And since only the Buddha has these qualities, and the divine creator and so on do not, he alone is the refuge. Therefore, his teaching and the community of his Shravakas are also worthy of being a refuge. So that's a little kind of teeny tiny statement, but because the Buddha is a valid, reliable refuge, then the Dharma of the Buddha and the beings who have realized that Dharma are, by extension, logically, also qualified and reliable objects of refuge. So in the short form, that's why we take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Again, J. Rinpoche says, develop this certainty from the depth of your heart, for once you are able to do this, they cannot fail to protect you. So there's 2 causes for being protected by the 3 jewels. There's the external cause, which is the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. The Buddha has done that work. The internal cause is our receptivity and our actualization and realization of what they teach. So J. Rinpoche says, the teacher has already fully realized the external factor, or the cause, but you suffer because you have not yet developed the internal factor in trusting yourself to the refuge. So on the one hand, you can think, hello, here I am, I live in a monastery, I'm wearing these robes, I have entrusted myself to the refuge. And that is true. However, until we actually can realize what the Buddha taught, our protection is pretty flimsy, right? So we don't discount where we are, we rejoice. We rejoice in the opportunities that we have, we rejoice in all the work that we've been able to do. And we also use this understanding not to get complacent about where we are, but to seize the opportunity while we have it, because we do not know when it ends. No clue. To develop the internal factor of entrusting ourselves to the refuge really is to cultivate the qualities that the Buddhas, and following the teachings the Buddha gave us. Okay? So, last week we left off, okay, questions about that, by the way? Yes. Oh yeah, you need a microphone.
What's the relevance of the four Buddha bodies within the context of refuge?
The relevance is that these four Buddha bodies actually describe exactly what the Buddha is, right? So you know, it's funny, they don't come in the first teachings. I don't even think they're in Lamrim Chenmo. But when Venerable Children and His Holiness started writing the Library of Wisdom of Compassion for the Western Mind, they have four Buddha bodies in volume 1. They have four Buddha bodies in volume 2. They have lots about four Buddha bodies in volume 4. I think they're in volume 3 too, because we're talking about Buddha nature. And you know, Venerable Children and also His Holiness wrote this series of 10 books for Western students who have a Western education and don't have a Dharma education as our groundwork, right? And when His Holiness talks about we need to be 21st century Buddhists, he means that we need to study and understand exactly what we're doing from a logical, rational, provable standpoint, because that's our education. We're trained in this scientific way of viewing the world. So if we understand the four Buddha bodies, the understanding of the four Buddha bodies, if we understand the mind, if we understand the continuity of the mind, it is endless and beginningless. If we understand that the mind can be purified completely, and then what's left if you do that? If we understand the emptiness of that mind is the only reason that mind can be purified. If we understand that out of those kinds of realizations, these emanation bodies that come from the great compassion of the Buddha, that's the method side of the path, is the cause of those. So that this very subtle Dharmakaya can't speak to us ordinary beings. We're too gross. We can't conceive of what's coming in at all. It is through these emanation bodies that the Buddha can teach and can guide. So we, as you know, scientifically trained, modern, educated students, need to understand where all this is coming from. Otherwise, it's like Buddhism is just another magical system, right? So that's the relevance of understanding it. I personally found it really difficult to understand. I heard teachings on these four Buddha bodies from really good teachers, not just an outline from me, for a long time. So before I was like, oh, okay, I get it. But it's based on understanding the mind, based on understanding the teachings that we've gotten on all these different aspects of the Dharma. Then the four Buddha bodies make sense. And that continues to grow, you know, I think, as the more we study and the more we learn. But it's the proof. It's the proof that we can do it too. Understanding the four Buddha bodies helps us really get that this is doable. You know, right now we're all, well, I'll speak for myself, taking it on faith. We have to examine, is the Buddha's, you know, word reliable? From my own examination, I can say in my years of practice, yes, the Buddha's been telling the truth all along. But the hook for me, I don't know about this for everybody else, but I could buy the first truth. Yes, dukkha. Causes of dukkha. Okay, that makes sense. Cessations. Really? Pathways to cessation? Well, if I don't buy cessation, then the paths to cessation don't really make much sense either. That's where, for me personally, I had to really spend a lot of time looking at what was being taught, trying to understand it, meditate on it, make it make sense, so that the whole system of the Four Truths made sense. And the basis of those Four Truths making sense is also understanding what Buddha is in the big context, in its biggest form, in its most ultimate form. Because what we didn't talk about last week, which we may or may not get to today, is what is the ultimate Buddha jewel and the conventional Buddha jewel. We didn't talk about those two things, and it gets more relevant to know that when we get to the Dharma. That's a good question. And the preciousness of this particular retreat is we have the time and the texts and the resources to really think about, what does that mean to me? What is these four Buddha bodies things? And it's confusing, because sometimes you hear there are 5 Buddha bodies, sometimes you hear there are 3 Buddha bodies, sometimes you hear there are 2 Buddha bodies. So when you understand how it all starts from Dharmakaya, Rupakaya, and what these sub-branches are, then each of those also makes more sense. And Venerable Chödrön has given extensive and very beautiful and very knowledgeable teachings on these many times, actually. And she's covered it a lot as we've been looking volume 3, Samsara, Nirvana, Buddha, Nature. So there's lots and lots of resources. Yeah. You're just getting superficial outlines. Yeah.
Venerable, when come to the Arya Sangha, I have a mental block, especially because I have not encountered any Arya Sangha's good qualities. But to me, my immediate experience of a Sangha is actually whoever that I come across, and I can imagine that, or visualizing that all the good qualities that I have already experienced, what kind of qualities they have developed in my vividly when I encounter with them. Can I, not the person, but the qualities, can I visualize on these qualities during this by developing conviction?
Yes, and it's really important to understand what is the true refuge of the Sangha. Probably won't get there today, but in brief, the Sangha refuge is this Sangha jewel is actually the same as the Dharma jewel. It is the realizations, the cessations, and the paths that have been realized in the minds of those beings. And we don't actually know that we haven't met them. They're not going around with neon signs saying, this is my realization. If we do, then we know that they don't have them. But when we understand or study about what's the significance of those realizations, then the Arya Sangha actually makes sense as the only refuge. A Sangha of 4 or more fully ordained beings is not even the conventional Sangha refuge. It is a representation of the Sangha refuge. And it has to be 4 or more. It has to be fully ordained just as a representation, not just a single Sangha member. Who may, and these 4 may or may not have the realizations. That doesn't matter. It's the 4 as the representation. So if you can see the Sangha and the qualities of the Sangha as something that inspires you, that's a seed, that representation. But don't stop there. Really let that grow and think about, well, what does it mean to be a realized being? What does it mean to hold these realizations and move in the world? And we have so many actual wonderful stories about that. Biographies of, a saint in Seattle. I have no idea what his realizations are, but we know practitioners who have lifetimes, documented lifetimes, I guess, to the extent that the Tulku system documents things, but lifetimes of those realizations that we can see. Great teachers whose texts we can see. Yeah, we can look at those. So it's a starting place, but there's so much more to Sangha. Okay, let's go back to the 10 qualities of the Buddha. Let's finish those today at least and see where we go. So remember, I got them out of here last week. We're using this text and this translation, and I won't confuse you with the other translations. So the 10 powers of the Buddha. This comes from the Ten Bhumi Sutra. So this is, a sutra teaching that describes these 10 qualities. And it's useful to know these. There's so many lists of Buddha qualities, and there are so many exquisite praises to the Buddha, epithets of the Buddha. I mean, we could just spend a whole lifetime studying praises of the Buddha and trying to analyze what does that mean and how do I aspire to these. So this is just one of the lists, and we probably won't get to many more because we don't have that many more weeks of this, but they're available. We'll find them. But this is a list that I like. So the first one, with direct unmistaken perception, the Tathagata knows the tenable and the untenable, the possible and the impossible. This one's about karma, knowing karma. Number 2, these are reviews. We got through the first 5. Only the Tathagata fully and accurately knows the intricacies of past, present, and future karma and their results. So every single detail of how this came to be, in what universe, at what time, this person did this, and then they did that, and so today this is ripening as this, and this will result in that. The Buddha knows those, and only the Buddha knows those. Only the Buddha knows. 3, the Tathagata knows the various destinations of ordinary beings, the samsaric realms, and the paths leading to rebirth there. So he knows the destinations even of the resulting of the practitioners of the 3 vehicles. He knows where they're headed. Excuse me. He fully understands the world and the various elements of the world. So it's not just mind that the Buddha knows, but the Buddha knows the nature of every single phenomena, how those systems work. 5, he knows the different inclinations of beings, which then enables the Buddha, he knows the different inclinations, interests, propensities, like that. And in that way can teach directly to each person. That's what many of these qualities show, is how the Buddha teaches us. So number 6. The Tathagata understands as it actually is the disposition of the faculties of other beings. So faculty here means the 5 faculties of faith, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. Anybody recognize this list? Faith, 5 powers. It's the 5 powers. So these 5 faculties, when cultivated, become the 5 powers. They're part of the 37 factors of enlightenment. They're critically important to cultivate and develop along the path to awakening. Faith, effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. And the Buddha knows each person's strength of these different faculties, and so can teach. So if somebody has a whole lot of faith, then, I think we mentioned this last week, if a person has a lot of faith, then they're guided in doing practices that inspire that faith. Or maybe then also guided in developing some other aspect like concentration. If the Buddha, is someone particularly inquisitive or, analytical, then the teachings will go in that direction. So, yeah, it's an important quality. Each of these just shows how the Buddha teaches and guides. Number 6. Sorry, that was number 6. Yeah, number 7. Because he has mastered the jhanas, the 8 meditative liberations and the 9 meditative absorptions, he knows the defilements, cleansing, and emergence regarding them. In other words, he knows all the meditative states, all the meditative stabilizations, how to get there. He knows all the mental hindrances to meditations and the methods for removing them. He knows how you come out of meditation. He knows how, we hear stories that I also don't understand about how, at some level of meditation, these beings along the path can go in and out of different meditative states quickly, different forms, different ways of thinking. Their minds are so quick, so agile, so concentrated. Buddha knows how to teach those, knows how to guide people to attain those, and because he's done it. He did it all. Every one of these faculties just shows what the Buddha already did to become Buddha. And because the Buddha did these things to become Buddha, he can guide us to become Buddha. You know, for me, I'm still counting breath. Let's just be honest about my level of concentration. Right? But someday, this will be possible because the Buddha knows I'm still counting breath. Right? Not every time, but someday I have to go back there. I'll count 1, 2. Okay. So number 8, the Tathagata recollects his manifold past lives, many eons of world contraction and expansion. Right? That's somebody else's translation. What is it here? The Tathagata recollects in detail his manifold past lives and their aspects and particulars. So he knows I was born here. This was my name. This is what I did. This is who I was married to. These were my children. This was my livelihood. This is how I died. Then I was reborn here, etc., 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 etc. So, like, now, how is this useful? What do you think? Karma. Yeah, it's karma, but why would it be useful for the Buddha to know this? Jigme?
If you've known where they've been and what people have understood and what they've accomplished, then you can guide them in the next steps so that they can go toward Buddhahood instead of getting lost in something else.
Yeah, exactly. So not only that, he knows the connections, but he also, this is an interesting thing about why we all have to become Buddha. Because even though the Buddha has complete equanimity in terms of benefiting every single being, through this long journey of becoming Buddha, different karmic connections have been made with different kinds of people. So people, not from the Buddhist side, but from our side, we have the karma to be touched by, guided by particular people, particular Buddhas, more than others because of that long time connection that Venerable Jigme is pointing out. So that's why we all have to do this. And I watch Venerable Children. It's so amazing how she deliberately cultivates her karmic connections with beings. Right? The first time I actually saw this was way years ago, I think before I moved here. But we were in Spokane for some reason and doing errands, I don't know what, and stopped at a playground for a picnic. So we brought out lunch because we were out for over lunchtime. So we stopped, we were eating at this picnic table, and there was these 2 boys playing basketball. Just, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, maybe a little older, playing basketball on the court in this park. And we were eating, I don't know, maybe you were with me. There was a few people there. We're eating lunch and we have a little extra fruit. We're starting to pack up and there was 2 leftover oranges. And she looked over at those boys and she took those 2 oranges and she put them in the hands of each of those boys. And at first I thought, what is she doing? And then I thought, oh, I know exactly what she's doing. That's one of the 4 ways of cultivating disciples, right? Generosity with those students. She's so deliberate. When she's, we're all giving mantra to these turkeys. We were all trained by her to do that. She's giving them Dharma teachings. She's talking to them. She's teaching as she goes. She's making that karmic connection so that when she is Buddha, they have it and they will meet her and she can help them. It blows my mind. Oh yes, she gives out money pills wherever she travels and teaches, but that mind that is constantly looking to make a karmic connection in a beneficial Dharma way, I don't know, it's something we can really learn from and appreciate from our teacher. So there will come a time, and who knows, maybe she already has it, that she can remember every single one of those connections. Yeah. So anyway, that's number 8. Number 9, with the divine eye, the Buddha sees beings dying and being born according to their karma. Knowing this, he does whatever is most beneficial to guide each being on the path to awakening. So, I mean, very similar reasoning, right? You can see how people die, how people are reborn, where they die, where they're reborn, what's the pathway from this one death to the next, over and over and over again. You know, especially since Jeffrey has been not well, Jeffrey Hopkins has not been well, I was looking at some notes from the past where I quoted in this note where he said, millions, billions and billions and billions of people have died, but no person is dead. Think about that. Billions and billions and billions of people have died, but no person is dead. That from the moment of the complete crumbling of any set of aggregates, that consciousness is already in motion for the next one. There's no dead person. There's a body there. No dead person. No one is dead. Of course, after he talked about it for a few minutes and really looked at all the angles of that, he said, "Oh well, maybe everybody's dead." Another way of thinking at it, but I thought it was something to think about. And then number 10, realizing with direct knowledge that Tathagata here and now enters upon and abides in the unpolluted liberation of mind and liberation by wisdom, and knows that all defilements have been eradicated. Yeah, this translation is basically the same. So, knowing here and now enters upon and abides in the unpolluted liberation of the mind. So what we know is that the Buddha never leaves his meditative concentration on emptiness. It is constant. That's where the mind dwells. At the same time, acts spontaneously to benefit other beings. At the very same time, knows all the phenomena of living beings. Only a Buddha can do that. Only a Buddha can do that, no matter how far an Arya being gets, all the way up through the 5 paths, 10 stages. How many stages? 1, 2, 3, 4, 10 stages, 5 paths, 10 stages, all the way up until they become Buddha. They always have the separation of the mind seeing the ultimate and mind seeing the conventional. It's only at Buddhahood that this passes and the Buddha can hold both of these things at the same time. Now, what does that mean? That's worth thinking about. Because it's hard to even imagine, but to think that this is a consciousness that pervades all phenomena, pervades the whole universe. And it's not just one. There wasn't just one Buddha. There have been countless Buddhas. There are countless Buddhas. So that that idea of the Buddha's omniscient mind of compassion and wisdom, fulfilling all, pervading all phenomena. It's a very big concept. It's something to think about. Yeah. Huh? It's not that big? Okay, tell me why.
Big, but it's not that big in one way, because we have some experience of this. We know, we have the expression hindsight's 20/20.
That's right.
And we have the many experiences almost every day of where our mind is more expansive and more contracted, and our perceptions are less diluted and more diluted. And once you've practiced not that long, you start to have some of that. And so it gives you the notion that, wow, there could be a mind there that was the most clear mind I have, could be clearer, could be a lot clearer. So we have some notion of this. It's not like it's so far off that we have no experience.
Yeah, that's true. That's really true.
It is hard to, I can't really grok the omniscience part, but you can, if you think of the mind as having that potential, and then you just see your own obstructions, any of the delusions that you recognize in your own mind, when they're gone, you have some taste.
Yeah, that's really true. That's really true. Yes.
online is asking, is there any reason a teacher would respect is there any reason a teacher would reject a student for any karmic reason?
Reject a student, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, that question is maybe above my pay grade in its ultimate sense, but I can imagine a teacher recognizing that I'm not the best guide for this student and sending him on to someone else. But to actually reject a Dharma student, I can't imagine. Does anyone have any experience of that? Yeah. It would have to be a very highly realized person to really know the karma. Oh, yeah. That's a good point. It depends. Yeah, how would you define the teacher? There are, there's lots of levels of teachers. Levels of teachers in terms of level of their own understanding and their own depth of practice. Yeah. So it sounds like this may be, I don't know if this is a speculative question or if this is someone's own experience. So it's really hard to answer in that way. But in general, I could definitely imagine someone thinking, let me send you to my buddy over there. Maybe better for your tendencies. Don't know. Okay. Anybody else have a thought?
It just seems like just by the very fact that they are connected, there is a karmic something there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Venerable Thubten?
There's the story of the old man who wanted to be a monk.
Yeah.
And two of the Buddha's disciples rejected that. They didn't see any connection for him karmically, but the Buddha did. But they had refused to give him ordination. So that kind of falls under that.
I don't agree. I think not finding a student qualified for ordination does not mean rejecting the student. That simply means that this person, we have quite a list of qualifications for Sangha that's right there in the Vinaya the Buddha gave. And we talked about this story last week, actually, and somebody else said, maybe I didn't have the karma to be a monastic either, although the person's a monastic. But what I pointed out was this man was 100 years old, I think, right? He was 100 years old. And he was ill, extremely ill. So I don't know what abbot would actually ordain a 100-year-old very ill person. And that's not rejecting the student. That is saying, is this a suitable thing for me, the abbot, to do? And this is for the Sangha, on behalf of the Sangha, is it a suitable thing for this person at this point in their life? So it's true that Shariputra and Moggallana could not see the merit this guy had in order to ordain, and the Buddha did and could and did ordain him. But I would not say that they rejected him as a student. I think he simply did not qualify from their capacity as abbots, their capacity as preceptors, to take this student in that way. Yeah, Brahmakonga?
One of the auxiliary bodhisattva precepts is to abandon not giving the Dharma to those who desire it.
Yeah.
In that case,
so they would always
reject
give the
them.
Dharma. Yeah, they wouldn't reject the student. But you also have to see what the student has interpreted as rejection. That's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking, that, when we're students and, not so far in our practice and not so far in our wisdom, we might ask someone for some very direct guidance. They might tell us to figure it out for ourselves. that isn't necessarily rejection, that can be a Dharma teaching. So I think the interpretation on the student side might be the biggest factor.
Yeah, very good point. Very, very good. Tenzin, and this is the last thing.
Just now on the point number 6, which is the 5 faculties. Oh, 6, number 6, there's 5 faculties. And I was thinking of, right, if a rejection itself is actually to help the students to understand or develop the 5 faculties, is probably actually is a form of like helping instead of like rejection.
Yeah, certainly. I think that follows on the same line that we were just talking about. I mean, how many people here, let's just be honest, how many people here haven't felt rejected by our teacher at some point in her? I mean, who has not? And have we come to realize that there was no rejection going on? This was my own sad need to be approved of and applauded and blah, 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 right? That has nothing to do with my teacher rejecting me. That's my own mind. And yes, it's something we learn and keep. Yes, our attachments have been rejected. Our craving has not been fed. That is not rejection by the teacher. So that's something to, I'm not to say that this person's question isn't coming from a place that's different than that, but that's surely my experience and I think a shared experience here. Okay, so I'm going to leave us with one question because we'll come back to the Dharma Jewel next week. But this question is, when you think of taking refuge in the Dharma, what comes to mind? How does that manifest in your mind? When you think of taking refuge in the Dharma, what comes to mind? And the other question I want to pose for people here, which might be a nice discussion, probably won't do it today, but it might be a nice discussion for us to do, is in the face of so many difficulties the Abbey has experienced in the last few months, or challenges, let's call it that, what has taking refuge in the Dharma looked like for you? How have you taken refuge in the Dharma? I think that'd be a very fruitful and supportive discussion for us all. Okay, let's send off our guests with a lot of love. We'll be back here next week. Yep.
Just to add one thing, Jeffrey Hopkins' book, Meditation on Emptiness, has very clear language about these 10 that might be helpful for people if they have that as a resource.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I looked at 3 different translations, but I didn't look there. And they're all a little, yeah, okay. Okay, good. Thank you. So let's